Okay, good morning, students. We will start our session. So, when it comes to poetry part, up to now we have completed three sonnets, two sonnets by William Shakespeare, and last week we completed the sonnet by John Donne. We started metaphysical poetry, and today our discussion is also about metaphysical poetry. Even today we are going to discuss about a very popular poem from John Donne. So before moving to this particular poem, I would like to tell you that you have to be familiar with metaphysical poetry. You have to go through the previous video and you have to get an idea what do you mean by metaphysical poetry, because without understanding the genre of metaphysical poetry, it will be very difficult for you to understand the idea behind these poems. Because when we learn literature, especially when we learn poetry, there are certain genres that we have to be familiar with, right? So there are romantic poetry, and you have Elizabethan poetry, then you have metaphysical poetry. Likewise, we have categorized poetry according to different significant characteristics, right? So whatever the characteristics that you can find in metaphysical poetry cannot be found in romantic poetry, right? So there are certain distinct features which are available only for metaphysical poetry, right? So today also we are going to discuss about that. So today we are going to have a discussion about the poem Go and Catch a Falling Star by John Donne. So before moving to the poem, we will try to understand what do you mean by metaphysical poetry and what are the important points that you have to remember under the category of metaphysical poetry. So even last week I mentioned, when we discuss about metaphysical poetry refers to the works of group of 17th century English poets like John Donne, George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, and Henry Waugh, who explored deep philosophical, spiritual, and intellectual themes in highly imaginative and witty ways. When we learn literature, metaphysical poetry plays a key role in the field of English literature because these poems are totally different from other genres of poetry. Most of the metaphysical poets, they used different types of conceits, different types of witty and ironical ideas when it comes to their poems. In simple terms, even last week I explained metaphysics. You can divide the word into two categories. Metaphysics. Metaphysics refers to ideas which goes beyond physical knowledge. Meta means beyond. Physics means physical knowledge, not the physics that you are going to learn in history, in science. That idea is also there. In simple terms, metaphysics means these poets are using number of metaphors, similes in their poetry which are taken from different types of examples which goes beyond our physical life. Now in this poem you will understand the poet is using so many metaphors. So many metaphors are used in the poem, but those metaphors cannot be found in our real life. Right? Those metaphors cannot be found in our real life. Those metaphors can be found sometimes related to what do you call heaven, sometimes they are related to the God, sometimes they are related to supernatural elements. Likewise, they goes beyond our physical measurements. That is why they are known to be metaphysical, right? Which goes beyond the physical movement of our day-to-day lives. Now, if you take other poets, they take examples of flowers, right? Flowers can be seen almost everywhere, right? Or else they may take a river. They may compare our life with a river. Rivers can be seen almost everywhere, right? In Sri Lanka, in Australia, we can find rivers, right? But when you take the example of devil, have you met the devil? No, nobody has met the devil. When we take the example of God, have you met the God? No, nobody has met the God. So now you can understand when it comes to metaphysical poetry, they use certain elements which goes beyond our explanation, metaphysics, right? In our natural normal life, we cannot capture those examples, what they take. That is what we call metaphysics, metaphysical poetry, right? So I will give you certain key features. Even in the last poem, I gave you a detailed description about what do you mean by metaphysical poetry. So this poem also comes under the category of metaphysics. So I am not going to explain here in that particular part in detail. Please make sure to go through the previous video, Better My Heart by Donne. In that particular poem, I have explained you what do you mean by metaphysical poetry. So in simple terms, what you have to realize, my dear students, metaphysical poetry means metaphysics, which means these poets are using certain metaphors, similes and images which goes beyond our nature. Things which cannot be seen in our environment, right? They can be supernatural things, they can be things related to God, related to a devil, related to different types of things that we cannot find them in our day-to-day life, in simple terms, right? Those are the metaphors and similes taken by these poets in order to explain their poem. That is why they are known to be metaphysical poetry, right? Something which goes beyond the level that we know. We know certain levels, certain things. Now I have given you example, flowers. We have seen flowers, right? Rivers, we have seen rivers. Stars, we have seen the stars, right? But we haven't seen the God. We haven't seen the devil, right? So when we go through John Donne's poetry, you will realize that he uses a lot of elements and objects as metaphors, similes, which are not related to our world. In our real world, we cannot find those things. Can you understand? So these poems, these poets, they wrote their poems based on this concept. That is why they are known to be metaphysical poetry, right? Okay, so I hope that you can understand. Did you finish? Please write down and pass me a message. Today we are going to start with metaphysical poetry, right? Not today actually, we have already started that. So pass me a message once you have finished, then we can move on to the next part. Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Shall we move on to the next part? Did you finish? Right, okay, thank you. Tanisha, you can write down, I think you have joined now. So we only started, we actually highlighted the idea of metaphysical poetry. We have been highlighting the idea of metaphysical poetry because you should have to have a very good idea about this. Now, without having an idea about metaphysical genre, it is difficult to understand metaphysical poetry. First and foremost, the student should understand what do you mean by this genre, right? So, unlike the previous poems by William Shakespeare, these poems are totally different. They have a different idea, right? When we go through the poem, you will realize that. Okay, what are the key features that we can find when it comes to metaphysical poetry? I hope you guys can see the screen. So you guys can write down, you can listen to my lecture and you can follow the explanation that I have given, right? Even others, I hope Binu can hear me. I hope Dioni can hear me. And Shaina, I hope you can hear me. Please pass me a message. Are you there in the class? Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me, right? Okay. Now, what are the key features, right? What are the key features that we can figure out when we come to metaphysical poetry? Number one, metaphysical conceits. Conceits refers to comparisons. I told you in metaphysical poetry, my dear students, we have unusual comparisons between very different things. Unusual comparisons refers to, my dear students, those comparisons cannot be seen in our day-to-day life. I have told you, right? The comparisons are done with the God, done with the devil, done with supernatural things, right? So these things we cannot actually experience in our day-to-day life. Now, normally poets are actually comparing human beings to flowers, to stars, to rivers, to so many beautiful natural objects. But when it comes to metaphysical poetry, we can understand their comparisons are actually beyond explanation, beyond nature, beyond physicality. That is why they are known to be metaphysics, beyond physicality. In our physical world, We have not seen the God. We have not seen the devil. We have not seen any supernatural elements. We have not seen all these magical elements, right? So that is why they are special. So that is why metaphysical poems are special than other poems, right? Metaphysical conceits can be found. What do you mean by conceits? Comparison, right? You can write down that one. That is the first key feature that we can figure out. Number two, philosophical and religious themes. So most of these poems are written based on philosophy or based on religion. The best example is Better My Heart, the third poem in your syllabus by John Donne, right? John Donne writes the poem Better My Heart, where you can find Putha religious themes, right? So most of these poems are written based on religious themes and philosophical themes, right? They deal with love, death, the soul, God, eternity, and human existence, right? So that is something very much important. Now, when we refer to William Shakespeare, we have studied two sonnets by William Shakespeare. You realize that William Shakespeare writes about the reality, the things that we can find in our physical world. Even his comparisons, even his similes and metaphors are very much common to our day-to-day life. But when you take metaphysical poetry, my dear students, try to understand they go beyond the physicality. They go beyond the nature. So philosophy is something very difficult to understand if you don't know the major idea of that. Philosophy is something very difficult to understand. So here, my dear students, one of the key features of metaphysical poetry is philosophical and religious themes. They deal with love, death, the soul, God, eternity, and human existence, right? So these are the basic themes when it comes to metaphysical poetry. Third point, intellectual tone. What do you mean by intellectual tone? Intellectual means wise. You are not a stupid fellow, right? Intellectual means you are not a stupid fellow. You are an intelligent person. You can understand about the society and world very quickly. The poems read like arguments or debates, often full of logic and reasoning. My dear students, unlike other poems, metaphysical poets are writing poems as arguments, right? They build up arguments, right? They ask questions. They have a reason to explain their answer. So when we go through metaphysical poetry, one of the key features that you have to figure out is that intellectual tone. Unlike the other poems, metaphysical poems, they always come up with an argument, right? In order to explain their idea or theme, they always come up with an argument. This can be taken as one of the major important factors when it comes to metaphysical poetry, right? They are poems like arguments or debates, often full of logic and reasoning, right? They always logic. They are always logical, right? Logical, and they try to prove that their answer is correct by logical reasoning. Number four, wit and paradox. Wit and paradox. What do you mean by that? Wit and paradox means clever play on words, which means that most of the metaphysical poets, they try to cynically criticize certain things that we see in our day-to-day lives, right? In order to do that, they use humor, they use laughter, they use irony as paradoxical statements in order to bring laughter, right? So the major reason or the main idea of these metaphysical poets, in order to cynically criticize, right, the things that they find, right? Now, if you take William Shakespeare, right, those are the two poems that you have done. When you go through those two poems, William Shakespeare is not laughing anyone. William Shakespeare is not criticizing women, right? William Shakespeare does not do that, right? But when it comes to metaphysical poetry, you will realize that poets like John Donne, they always try to, right, criticize, cynically criticize the object that they are going to explain. It can be a woman, it can be the god, it can be the devil. What they try to do is that they try to criticize. අපි සිංහලෙන් කියනවා විවේචනය කරනවා. විවේචනය, right? Criticize. The major idea of these poets is to criticize what they do, right? Criticize what they experience, right? So this can be taken as another key feature when it comes to metaphysical poetry. Very good. The fifth one, scientific and everyday imagine. They often drew comparisons from astronomy, medicine, navigation, alchemy, law, right? So with the word you can understand metaphysics, right? Which goes our physical beyond our physicality. They have scientific and everyday imagery. So they are comparisons. Their comparisons are actually based on science, scientific experiments, right? From astronomy, from medicine, from navigation, from alchemy, from law, something like that. So these are the key features that we can figure out when it comes to metaphysical poetry. Now you may ask, sir, why are we learning all these key features? Why? Why do we have to learn all these key features? Why? Why do we have to learn? Because Puta, when you learn literature, you have to figure out the difference, right? You have to show the difference between different types of other poetic genres and metaphysical poetry. Now we have Elizabethan poetry. Now we have romantic poetry. Now we have metaphysical poetry. We have post-colonial poetry, Sri Lankan poetry. Likewise, we have divided. So these days we are discussing about metaphysical poetry. So how metaphysical poems are different from romantic poems? What are the differences? What are the key features that we can realize? So as a literature student, you should be able to understand these differences, right? When you are answering questions, you should know, okay, these are the changes, these are the differences, so I am going to highlight about them. So these are the key things that you have to pay your attention when it comes to metaphysical poetry. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message once you have finished. Then we can move on to the next part. I hope you can understand. If you have any problems, please make sure to ask Taranika, then Tanisha, Dioni. Check whether you can understand. If you can understand, send me a message. Then I can move on to the poem and I can start my explanation. Okay, Sanjana, thank you so much for your message. What about the other students? Send me a message once you have done. Dioni, did you finish? Please pass me a message. If you are in a position of turning on your camera, make sure to turn on your cameras and join. That is the best way to join an online class, because then we know that you are positively engaging in the class and you are doing your work. So make sure to complete your notes. We have given you 3 days, because then we can actually complete our work quickly and we can go to questions. We can discuss question papers and we can discuss answers. So then you will be familiar with the subject. That is why I have divided the subject into 3 days, right? So when it comes to poetry, we can actually complete a lot of poems within a day, because I have given you 2 hours, right? But in most of the classes, they have given only 1.5 hours, only 1 day for week. I don't think personally they will be able to complete their syllabus. So we can't actually take that kind of responsibility about the lives of children. So I take the full responsibility in my subject. That is why I have divided 3 days for you in order to teach them separately, because that is the best way to cover up the syllabus, because we have a voluminous syllabus. Okay, right. So we will move on to the poet. I am not going to give you a lot of information about the poet. As we know, even in the previous poem, we have covered about the poet. So today we are going to learn about metaphysical poetry by John Donne. John Donne can be identified as the pioneer when it comes to metaphysical poetry, right? Actually, he is the one who initiated the genre. When we tell the name metaphysical poetry, the first thing that comes to our mind is John Donne, right? The first person that comes to our mind is John Donne. So John Donne, 1572 to 1631, was one of the most prominent poets of the metaphysical school, celebrated for his intellectual depth, wit, and striking use of conceits. Conceits refers to, my dear students, comparisons, right? Make sure to remember this word. When we learn metaphysical poetry, you need this word. I will highlight this word. You can write down the meaning of this word. Conceits refers to comparisons, right? Now I have highlighted, I hope you guys can see the screen. Conceits means Puta comparison, right? So metaphysical poets, what they do, they always compare things with unusual objects. The objects which cannot be seen in our day-to-day society, right? Beyond comparison, unusual. He was born in London. He studied at Oxford and Cambridge, though he never obtained a degree because of his Catholic background, and later turned the Church of England, becoming the Dean of St. Paul's, right? So he actually studied in Oxford and Cambridge, but he could not actually complete his degree because later he was actually moved on with religion, right? So he became an ardent follower of Catholicism. So Better My Heart can be taken as one of the best examples where we have studied that poem last week. So when you read that poem, you can understand how he requests from the God to better his heart, attack his heart, and make him one of the uh, one of the greatest followers of Catholicism or Christianity. So from that poem, you can understand what kind of belief, what kind of trust that he actually put upon towards religion or Christianity. That part is important, right? Okay. So he is known to be a very popular poet, right? So some knowledge about the poet will definitely help you to understand the poem. So please pass me a message once you have finished, then we will move on to the next part. Hurry up. So today our discussion is about our fourth poem in the syllabus, Metaphysical Poetry. We are covering the poem Go and Catch a Falling Star by John Donne, advanced level English. So we have a literature part and language part as well. So I am telling my dear students, literature part we can cover, but most importantly, you have to be very familiar with your language as well, right? So you will get marks for your language paper as well. So make sure to put your 100% effort in order to cover all the lessons, even through recordings, right? So go through the records and make sure to complete your work. That is the best way that you can complete your work, right? Okay. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message if you have finished. Then we can move on to the next part. Shall we move on? What about the other students? Ravi Kumar, Taranika, Binu, Dioni. Pute, did you finish? Shall I move on? Pute, send me a message. I am waiting for your messages. Okay, right. Okay, right. We are moving on. Right. Complete the note because don't wait for the recording. If you are coming to the online class, like make sure to complete the records, like complete your notes then and there, then that is easy. Donne's poetry explores themes of love, religion, death, and human existence with a unique blend of passion and reason. His style is marked by paradoxes, irony, and unusual imagery drawn from science, philosophy, and daily life. Right? So, when you learn this poem, you will realize that his writing style is different. So, as I have told you, he is known to be the pioneers of metaphysical poetry. What are the key features in metaphysical poetry? We discussed about the key features. When we go through those key features, you can realize. So John Donne highlights about the theme of love, religion, death, and human existence with a unique blend of passion and reason, right? So when we go through his poems can be divided into two parts actually. I have told you even Last week I explained this. So before becoming an ardent follower of Christianity, right, he follows a different way of writing where he writes about lust, he writes about ladies, he writes about love, he writes about the reality of life. But after that, what happened? He converted into a spiritual man, or else an ardent follower of Christianity, and afterwards most of the poems were dedicated to religion and God, right? So basically his poems can be divided into two parts, right? So first and foremost, he wrote about romantic nature and romanticism related to love and sexuality. And after that, once he realized his ultimate love for the God, he changed his path, right? So basically that is why we have two poems now. If you take Better My Heart, that poem is more religious, right? More religious. That poem belongs to the category of religion, right? But this particular poem does not belongs to the category of religion. In this particular poem, Go and Catch a Falling Star, he tries to explain his bitter experiences about women, right? So he has received some kind of a bitter experience from women. In your English, we can say he has received a boot from a woman, from a lady, and as a result of that, he tries to figure out that, he tries to explain the fact that all the women in this world are unfaithful, right? That is the major idea that he tries to bring up in this poem, right? So due to his bitter experience. So when you go through the syllabus, make sure to understand two poems are given to us in order to understand the writing of John Donne, where we have the romantic type poem, which is known to be Go and Catch a Falling Star, and a religious poem, which is known to be Better My Heart. Both poems are equally important to us. Right, okay. So how many of you are still writing? Please pass me a message. Shall we move on to the next part? Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Shall we move on? Please send me a message. I need 3 students to complete their notes. Okay, Sanjana, thank you, Pute. Right, what about the others? Did you finish? If you can turn on your cameras, make sure to do so. Right? Otherwise, we don't know whether you are engaging in the class or not. Right? Thank you, Taranika. Thank you so much. Right? What about the others? Did you finish writing? Please pass me a message. Right? Okay. Thank you so much. We will move on to the next part. So now we have some kind of an idea about the poet, and we can move on with the explanation. So let's discuss what is this poem is all about and what kind of idea that the poet is trying to highlight by writing this particular poem. Now you have a very good understanding about metaphysical poetry, features related to metaphysical poetry, and now let's try to figure out what kind of idea is given in this particular poem by the poet. So make sure to remember, this is not a poem related to religion. When we take John Donne's poetry can be divided into two forms. Before becoming an ardent follower of Catholicism, he wrote poems about love, sexuality, women, and his bitter experiences related to that. So this particular poem comes under that category. The previous poem, which we studied last week, Better My Heart, can be taken as one of the best examples for his poetry, which is actually influenced by Christianity or Catholicism. Religious poetry, right? So that's the difference that you have to figure out in this poem, right? Okay. So we will move on. We will try to understand what he has actually mentioned here. John Donne's poem, Go and Catch a Falling Star, is a witty and cynical exploration of the impossibility of finding a woman who is both beautiful and faithful. I told you, this is actually a bitter experience, right? Actually gone by him. So I have highlighted that part. Even you can highlight. Who is both beautiful and faithful. So according to the poet says almost all the ladies, almost all the women who live in this world are unfaithful. They are not beautiful, and they are unfaithful at the same time. Now, why the poet is writing like that? What is the reason? The reason is, my dear students, some kind of a bitter experience that he had undergone in his life, right? Some kind of a bitter experience. Now, relationships can break, right? There are problems, right? So you are teenagers, you know what will happen. You may also have love affairs, we don't know. So you may have bitter experience with your boyfriend or girlfriend, some kind of a thing, right? He has also undergone some kind of a problem like that, right? Woman is finding a woman who is both beautiful and faithful. So he tries his level best to criticize, right? His major intention is to criticize women because of the bitter experience that he has undergone, right? Okay. The speaker begins with a series of impossible commands such as catching a falling star, impregnating a mandrake root, or hearing a mermaid sing, using these striking metaphysical conceits to stress how unlikely such tasks are, right? So in order to show the difficulty of finding a faithful woman, in order to show how difficult it is to find a faithful, beautiful woman, John Donne uses set of metaphysical comparisons, metaphysical conceits. As an example, he says, go and catch a falling star. Can you catch a falling star? No, you can't do that. You can catch a ball. You can catch an apple, right? You can catch something like that, but you can never go and catch a falling star, right? It is not possible. So he gives a list of impossible tasks in order to prove argument. I told you, right? In metaphysical poetry, what do you find? Arguments and metaphysical conceits, right? So he gives certain tasks, impossible tasks that as human beings we will never be able to do, right? We will never be able to do them, right? So there you can find, by giving these impossible tasks, what he tries to address, what he tries to express in his poetry is that these things are impossible. Just like that, it is very impossible to find a faithful woman. Now you can understand, in real life these things cannot be done. Just like that, in this life we cannot find a faithful woman. So he is very upset about his breakup. After the breakup, he tries to figure out that, he tries to tell to the whole wide world that all the women who live in this world are fake. They are unfaithful, right? So this is the idea he tries to highlight in his poem. So he gives series of examples, right? Or else we can say metaphysical conceits, metaphysical comparisons, right? So this is what we are going to learn. This is what we are going to highlight. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message once you have finished. Right. Thank you, Sanjana. Right. Okay. So I hope that you guys have completed. We will move on to the next part. Thank you so much. Right. Okay. Now you have some kind of a basic idea, right? Before moving to the poem, the students should have to have a basic idea about the poem. So in this poem, now you know what is the idea, right? So the poet is trying to compare, taking certain impossible tasks, right? I will explain you what are the impossible tasks, right? Metaphysical comparisons. Taking those impossible tasks, the poet tries to figure out the fact that just like these things are impossible, you will never find a faithful woman in this world. So his basic idea is to criticize all the women who live in this world. Can you understand? He is trying to criticize all the women who live in this world. In order to do that, he takes set of impossible tasks. So as literature students, we are going to follow what are those impossible tasks and how he has compared them with the belief of people when it comes to accepting women in different settings, right? Okay. He then extends this logic to women, claiming that even if one were to travel for thousands of days and nights to witness all the wonders of the world, he would never discover a woman who is both true and fair, right? So, furthermore, the writer explains the fact that even you walk, right, thousands of days and nights to witness all the wonders of the world, right? Now, that is not practical actually, right? A human being live only for 60 years to 70 years, right? So we won't be able to actually walk thousands of days and nights. That is not that much possible. So however, it is also impossible. So even if you can do that, the poet says, even if you can do that, make sure to understand you will never find a woman who is both true and fair. It is very difficult to find a woman who is both true and fair. The poem ends with a satirical twist. Even if such a woman were found, by the time the speaker came to meet her, she would already have been unfaithful to two or three, right? So the poet says, okay, just imagine that you have found, you will never be able to find such a faithful woman. Just imagine the fact that, okay, you have found such a woman, right? But make sure to remember at the end of the day, when you find that particular woman, right, at that particular time, she may have already slept with, she may have already associated, she may have already betrayed two or three other men, two or three other men, right? So he tries to highlight the fact that this is the reality of women, right? So I am not actually agreeing with this because I personally believe there are so many faithful women in this world, right? What about your mother? She is also a woman. I am not agreeing for this particular idea, but when you take literature, when you take the literature value, when you take the beauty of language, when you go through that, you will realize that this is a very beautiful poem and how the poet has actually used these metaphysical conceits or metaphysical comparisons to this particular poem, which makes the poem beautiful, right? So finally, the poet says, even if you have found such a woman, make sure to remember when you are ready to express your love for her, right, you will realize that she has already slept, she has already betrayed for two or three men, so you will be the fourth one or fifth one, right? So that clearly shows us the reality of life, right? So he tries to highlight the fact that most of the women, they are unfaithful, right? They are having so many affairs with other men, they are having so many relationships with other men, so it is very difficult to find a faithful woman in this world, right? In simple terms, that is the idea that the poet has highlighted. So if you have finished, please pass me a message and we can move on to the next part. So now simply I have given the idea, right? My basic intention is to give some kind of an idea to students about this particular poem. That is my basic intention. So if you guys have finished, please pass me a message. If you have finished, then we can move on to the next one. Hurry up. Right, okay. So now you have a basic idea about the poem. So what is the main intention of the poet? Now, in previous week also we studied Better My Heart. There, the poet is not going to criticize God. The poet is not going to criticize anyone. Because that poem is actually written with a different intention. There, the poet wants to try what kind of love, what kind of devotion that he has towards the God. But here in this poem, his main intention is to criticize women, right? His main intention is to criticize women. He tries to highlight the fact that women are unfaithful. That is what he tries to say, right? Okay, we will move on to the poem. I will explain them line by line so you can understand what is the idea given here, and you can get to know what are the impossible tasks that he explains in these lines, and those things are impossible, and just like that it is very impossible to find a faithful woman as well. What is the line? First line, go and catch a falling star. Can we do that, my dear students? First and foremost, check whether you can do that. You can catch a tennis ball, you can catch a tennis ball, you can catch an apple. There are certain things that you can do, but this particular thing is something impossible, right? We cannot catch a falling star. Falling star refers to a meteor, right? It is not possible. No one is able to catch a falling star. This is the first metaphysical comparison that he brings in the poem. I told you, in his poetry he brings number of metaphysical conceits, comparisons. Now this is the first comparison that he brings, where he says, go and catch a falling star. Can you do that? No, you will never be able to do that, right? You will never be able to do that. Go and catch a falling star, right? That one we can't do, right? We cannot catch a falling star. The speaker challenges the reader to do impossible things, right? In metaphysical poetry, they are known to be metaphysical comparisons. Like catching a star that falls from the sky. Falling star means a meteor, but here symbolizes something unattainable, right? So the main idea of the first line is that you will never be able to catch a falling star. Even though the poet is commanding us to do that, you have to understand you will never be able to do that. Just like that, if it is impossible, make sure to remember same impossibility can be seen when you are going to find a faithful woman. Try to understand catching a star is something impossible. Just like that, finding a faithful woman is also impossible and impractical. Finding a woman is also impossible and impractical. Can you understand the meaning of the poem now? Right? He tries to tell that, okay, go and catch a falling star. You will never be able to do that. And finding a faithful woman, that is also something that you cannot do. Right? You won't be able to do that. That is the idea highlighted in the poem. That is the idea highlighted in the poem, in the first line. So these are the metaphysical conceits that we can find, right? So did you finish? Please pass me a message. Shall we move on to the next part? Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Thank you, Puta. Surya has completed. What about the others? Sanjana has completed. Okay. What about the others? Please pass me a message. Okay, Taranika has completed. Right. Okay, good. Right. Then we will move on to the next part. You can complete your notes. Right. The second conceit. Right. We are moving with the second conceit, second unusual comparison. Now, this is something very much important because when I am explaining about metaphysical poetry, I told you, right, one of the key features of metaphysical poetry is that using certain conceits, comparisons, metaphors, similes, and objects which goes beyond our physicality, right? Supernatural. Now here in the second line he says, get with child a mandrake root. get with child a mandrake root. Now I hope that you guys can see the photo, right? So from that photo you can understand what do you mean by a mandrake root. So these things are very much supernatural. I told you one of the key features of metaphysical poetry can be identified as supernatural elements, right? So mandrake root in our day-to-day life, we cannot find a mandrake root, right? This is a mythical tree, right? You may have seen this in Harry Potter first film. If you have watched the Harry Potter first film, you can remember this particular tree, right? Mandrake, right? Okay. So meaning mandrake roots, a plant thought to have magical powers. So in our day-to-day life, my dear students, we don't find plants like this, right? We can find actually a coconut tree or jack tree or something like that, but we don't find any mandrake root, right? So now you can understand the idea of metaphysical poetry. Most of the things, most of the objects, most of the comparisons that they use, they are not real, right? Fantasy, right? They belong to the magical world, right? That is why it is actually highlighted in Harry Potter. Now, meaning mandrake root, a plant thought to have magical powers, were believed to resemble the human body and scream when pulled out of the earth. So these mandrake roots, right, when you take them out, the mandrake root, as I have given on the screen, they may have the body shape of a baby. They may have a body shape of a child, but make sure to remember it is not a child. This particular plant is very dangerous and it is poisonous. But it has the body shape of a child. Even in this picture, you can figure out that it has the body shape of a child. The mandrake root looks like the shape of a human body, almost like a child, but of course, it can never actually be pregnant or with child, right? So you cannot find a real child from a mandrake root because the tree mandrake itself is supernatural. It is impossible to find or impossible to get a child from a mandrake root because the mandrake is not real. And the second point is mandrake roots are very poisonous. So the poet says the impossibility that we can find, the impossibility that we can find when it comes to the mandrake root in order to get a child, the same impossibility can be seen when we are searching for a faithful woman. Can you understand? So, human beings will never be able to get a child from a mandrake root, even though the mandrake root, what do you call, has the shape of a child, we will never be able to get a real child from the mandrake root. It is impossible, right? The body shape is like that. Body shape is like a child, but we will never be able to take a real child, biological child from a mandrake root. That will never happen. If that is not going to happen, just like that, finding a faithful woman is also impossible. Can you understand what I am telling now? This is the second comparison. So he says, even though the mandrake root is like a child, make sure to remember it is not a real child. The child is not biological. It is not possible to take a real child from the mandrake root because it is mythical and it is poisonous. If it is like that, that is the comparison, right? If it is like that, try to understand we will never be able to take a child from the mandrake root. Just like that, you will never be able to find a faithful woman in this world. So now you can understand these comparisons are very absurd, right? We have not seen, even in movies we have seen mandrake root, right? But we have not actually come across, right? About this type of what do you call roots, right? So this is the idea highlighted in the poem. So hurry up and write down. If you can't understand, send me a message. Right, okay. So we will move on to the next part. I hope you guys have completed. Right, so I am pretty sure that you are familiar with this particular photo, right? This particular photo is taken from Harry Potter, right, movie. So if you have watched the Harry Potter first movie, I am pretty sure most of the children are actually familiar with Harry Potter. So if you have seen the first movie of Harry Potter, you may have come across this particular photo, right? So Mandrake, right? Mandrake root, this is mythical, mystical, magical. So such things cannot be found in this world. But the poet says it is impossible, but yet make sure to remember, even if you can get, even if you can get a child from that mandrake root, a biological child, make sure to remember you will never find a faithful woman in this world, right? So the main intention of the poet is to criticize the faithfulness related to women. So according to him, he tries to highlight the fact that no woman in this world is faithful, right? Of most of them are cheaters. That is what he tries to explain. Get with child, a mandrake root. The challenge is to impregnate once again an impossibility, right? So this is something impossible. Just as a mandrake root cannot truly conceive, a mandrake root cannot become pregnant and give a child to us. True beauty and loyalty in a woman cannot exist. Difficult word, mandrake, a plant associated with myths, magic, and superstition, right? So now you can understand the second conceit or else the second absurd comparison. The poet says, you will never be able to take a child from the mandrake root because no one is possible of making the mandrake root pregnant. If it is impossible, remember another impossibility in this world is the faithfulness of women. Women are not faithful. I am pretty sure about that. The entire poem is highlighting the idea. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Right, okay, we will move on to the next part. I hope you guys have completed. Shall we move on to the next part? Now you can understand how these unusual comparisons are used when it comes to the poem. This is the beauty of metaphysical poetry, right? You are taking unusual comparisons, right? Absurd comparisons. This is the beauty of metaphysical poetry. This is what I have explained, right? So these are the key significant features that you have to witness. I have explained you that part, but practically the student should witness, okay, now these things are impractical. You all know that Harry Potter is not a real movie. It is based on magical things. So Mandrake root is something magical, mystical, mysterious, right? So the main intention of the poet is important. The main intention of the poet is to highlight women are set of unfaithful creatures, right? So he has received some kind of bitter experience from a lady, right? And after that, he tries to generalize the idea that all the women in this world are unfaithful, cruel, merciless, and brutal. That is what he tries to explain. Right, okay, so we will move on to the next part. I hope you guys can see the screen. Tell me where all past years are. This is the next impossible conceit, metaphysical conceit that the poet tries to explain. What happened to the past years? Can you go back to your O-level class? Can you go back to your grade 5 scholarship class now? Can you go back? You will never be able to go back. It is impossible. If it is that much impossible, the next impossibility is you will never be able to find a faithful woman in this world, even if you can go to the all past years. You will never be able to go through all the past years, right? You don't have a stargate inside your room. If you have a stargate inside your room, you can go, right, to the future or to the past, right? We all know that our technology has not developed to that level, right? We can't actually go towards the time, right? That technology has not developed. So the poet says, no one will be able to go to the past years, right? That is something impossible. That impossibility can be seen when you are trying to find out a faithful woman. Can you understand? Can you understand the comparison? You will never be able to go through the past years in your life. Just like that, you will never be able to find a faithful woman in this world. That is what the poet says. I hope you can understand. So you can write down the explanation. This is the third conceit, third comparison that he highlights. I hope you guys can see the screen. Another impossible task, explain where time goes once it has passed. Right? The speaker asks someone to explain where time goes and once it has passed. Just like you cannot bring back yesterday or point to where last year exists, this is another impossible task. The same impossibility can be found when we are going to find a faithful woman. The same impossibility can be seen when we are in search of a faithful woman. That will never happen, right? Do not even try to find a faithful woman. That is not going to happen. That is not possible. That is what the writer says in simple words, right? Okay, hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Can you understand my explanation? What about Dioni? Dua, can you understand? What about Binuputa? What about Tanisha Dua? What about Surya? Sanjana, can you understand? Don't listen to this like a Dhamma sermon, na? If you can't understand, please tell me, right? That is important, right? So make sure to tell me whether you can't understand. That is something very much important, right? You must write everything with your understanding. You are doing English as a subject. So when you are doing English as a subject, it is important to understand the idea of the poem, right? What is the basic idea that we are going to highlight? So these are the basic things that you have to be familiar with. So when you go through the poem, you can realize how many irregular comparisons or conceits are used by the poet in order to highlight the unfaithful behavior of women. The main idea of the poet is to highlight unfaithful behavior of the women, right? Okay. How many of you are still writing? Please pass me a message. Shall we move on to the next part? Right? So all these three examples, all these three comparisons clearly highlight only one thing. What is that? Women are unfaithful. Right? That is the basic idea. Women are unfaithful. We don't want to find out whether women are unfaithful or not. If you are taking in that perspective, there are so many men in this world, they are also unfaithful, right? We can't actually categorize women and say that, okay, women are only unfaithful and men are faithful. That is not going to work. Both men and women are unfaithful up to some extent. As a literature student, but you have to figure out how these irregular comparisons, absurd comparisons, metaphysical conceits are used by the poet in order to highlight his idea. That is the beauty of literature. That is the beauty of literature, how these irregular comparisons are used by the poet in order to highlight his intention. Right? The beauty of language. This is what we are going to witness. This is what we are going to appreciate. We are not going to argue that this poet is telling something wrong. Women are not unfaithful. Women are not Women are not unfaithful. They are faithful. You can argue like that. This is his personal experience, not your personal experience. So as a literature student, you have to think, right? Because most of them, I think, majority of them are girls. So you may be thinking that like we are not such people, right? We are not such ladies. So why the poet is actually criticizing us? You may have the question. So that is not the basic idea here. Try to understand. Did you get my point? So the basic idea here is that how the poet has used these irregular comparisons, right? Metaphysical conceits, metaphysical comparisons in order to highlight his idea. This is what you have to figure out, right? Okay, so I hope that you guys have completed. We will move on to the next part. This is the fourth comparison that we are going to highlight. I hope you guys can see the screen, right? So I told you when we go through metaphysical poetry, we have a lot of examples under the category of supernatural existence, right? We discuss about the supernatural existence. So this can be taken as one example. Oh, who cleft the devil's foot? Oh, who cleft the devil's foot? Who cleft the devil's foot? So here I have given you an imaginary picture of the devil. I have given you the imaginary picture of the devil, right? So no one has seen the devil. Different people can actually highlight devil in a different way. So here meaning is a reference to the superstition that the devil had a cloven split hoof. Now I want you to pay your attention to the feet of this particular devil. Can you see the feet? Can you see the feet of this particular devil, right? They are cleft. Cleft means divided. They are divided, right? So the poet is asking, devil is known to be the most dangerous creature that we have ever heard. We have seen. We have not seen the devil, right? Devil is known to be the most dangerous, merciless creature that we have ever heard. So what kind of a person have that bravery, right? What kind of a person um, will have that bravery to cleft the devil's foot? No one is brave enough to cleft the devil's foot. No human being will be able to cleft the devil's foot. That is not practical. That is impossible. A human being cannot do that. Can you understand? A human being won't be able to cleft the devil's foot. That is something impossible, some kind of an impossible task that a man cannot do, a woman cannot perform. If it is that much impossible, you will never be able to find a faithful woman in this world. If this particular action is impossible to do, same impossibility can be seen finding a faithful woman. Can you understand? So this is the fourth conceit comparison that we can find. Nobody knows who cleft the devil's foot. Cleft means dividing. Now you can see a small gap here, right? Dividing. No one knows who cleft that. And the poet says, I am pretty sure a human being cannot do that. It is impossible. Do you think that a man will be brave enough to go near the devil and cleft the foot? That will never happen. No human being is capable of doing that. If it is impossible to do, same impossibility can be seen when it comes to believing a woman who is faithful. So there are no faithful women in this world. That is the idea highlighted by the poet, right? Okay, I hope you can understand with the picture. That is why I have given you the picture, right? Okay, a reference to the superstition that the devil had a cloven split hoof. The challenge is to discover who actually split it, right? Nobody knows, right, who actually did that. And the poet says, I am pretty sure a human being cannot do that. It is impossible, right? A human being cannot do that. It is impossible. Just like that, it is impossible to find a faithful woman. It is impossible to find a faithful woman. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. If you have finished, we can move on to the next part. Okay, right. I hope that you guys have understood. Diony, can you understand my explanation? What about the other young students? This is not a difficult poem to understand, right? Very easy. Always try to figure out that how these conceits are used. It is not about whether women are faithful or men are faithful. It is a personal problem, right? It is a personal problem. But as literature students, what we try to figure out is that how the language is used, how powerful the explanation given by the poet. That is what matters, right? That is what we have to figure out. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. I hope you guys have completed. So we will move on to the next part. Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, okay, very good. Right. Okay. Right, let's go to the next conceit. Teach me here to mermaids singing, right? So this is another impossibility that the poet tries to highlight, right? Teach me here to mermaids singing. What does it mean? Teach me here to mermaids singing. What do you mean by this? Mermaids are mythical beings. Hearing them sing is impossible like all the other tasks. Can you understand? So there are certain rumors about these mythical creatures, right? But in reality, no one has found them. In reality, no one has found them. So the poet says, it is difficult to find these mythical creatures. So how can, if they are difficult to find, if they are mythical, how impossible to hear their voices? That is what the poet says. How impossible to find their voices. It is something impractical. You will never be able to do that. It is something impractical. You will never be able to do that. Mermaids are mythical beings. Hearing them sing is impossible. Like all the other tasks, it is a difficult thing, right? Mermaid is half woman, half fish creature from mythology, right? So from the picture you can find out them. So the poet says it is impossible to hear the singing of mermaids. If it is impossible to hear the singing of mermaids, same impossibility can be seen when it comes to believing in women, right? So it is impossible to find a faithful woman in this world. Same impossibility can be found. That is what the poet says, right? I hope you can understand. If you have finished, please pass me a message. Then we can move on to the next part. Right, okay. I hope that you guys have completed. So we will move on to the next part. Okay, right. Or to keep off envy's stinging, right? Or to keep off envy's stinging. What do you mean by that, right? Jealousy. So this is the next conceit that the poet tries to highlight. This is a common thing that even we face. Like, now you may say that, no, no, sir, I am not jealous with my friends. I love them. I always help them. No, no. The reality is we all are jealous up to some extent. As human beings, jealousy is something which is there in our blood. No one can be indifferent to jealousy, right? So here the poet tries to highlight all the human beings in this world are jealous, right? So envy means jealousy. So the poet says, you cannot find a human being in this world who is not jealous, right? Who is not jealous. Now you may say that, no, no, sir, I am not jealous. To certain extent only I am jealous. To certain extent also there is jealousy. Now as an example, if I don't have a car, if I have a bicycle, I am jealous with people who have got cars. If I have a car, if I don't have a helicopter, right? So I am jealous with people who have helicopters, something like that. Jealousy is something very common. According to the poet tries to highlight the fact that jealousy is something very common that we can find in all the human beings. Can you understand? Here, the next conceit is highlighted, metaphysical conceit, metaphysical comparison. It is difficult to find, right? Show me someone who is not affected by jealousy. Show me someone who is not jealous. It is impossible, right? Because almost all the men and women in this world are jealous. They have jealousy, right? Just like that, it is impossible to find a woman who is faithful. It is impossible to find a woman who is faithful. So the poet says, teach him how to avoid the pain caused by envy, which is as impossible as the earlier tasks, right? So here envy means pain or jealousy. So the poet says, it is difficult to find a human being who is not jealous, right? Who does not possess jealousy. Just like that, it is impossible to find a man, impossible to find a woman, I'm sorry, impossible to find a woman who is not faithful. Who is not faithful, right? Which means almost all the women are unfaithful. In other words, right? Almost all the women are unfaithful. That is the idea highlighted here. Okay, hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message once you have finished.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Uday, yes.
There in the book, this is not the next line in the poem.
In the book, it is not the next line. If that's so, wait, I will check. It's not the next line. So we have discussed this one. Teach me here to mermaids singing. In the book, can you tell me what is the next line, Putaif? If you can, what is the next line you have in the book?
And find what wine serves to advance an
Then you don't
honest
have one
mind.
line there in the poem, Puta. The poem is wrong. The poem is wrong. You have to add this line. Teach me here to mermaid singing. After this line should be there. So in your poem, you have a problem. Not in my one. The book is wrong there. Please make sure to add this line. Your poem is wrong, I think. Right? Please make sure to add this line. In the original poem, it is there.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
In my book also, this line is not there.
Okay, right. Please make sure to add that. In the original poem, you have to have this. After tell me where all past years are, who cleft the devil's foot, teach me here to mermaid singing, and the next part should be or to keep off envy's stinging. So please make sure to add that line, because in the original poem you have that. Sometimes the book may have the different version of the poem, so it may happen, right? But this is the original poem, so make sure to add that line if you don't have that in the book. Okay, please pass me a message if you have finished. Now we have discussed so many conceits, right? Number of conceits are highlighted in the poem. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message once you have finished, then we can move on to the next part. Right, okay. So now you can understand we have gone through so many conceits. If this part is not there in your poem, make sure to add that. So this part says, jealousy is something common to all the human beings. No one can be indifferent to jealousy. There may be certain levels of jealousy, but jealousy is something very common, right? Any human being will go through jealousy, right? Sometimes you are jealous with other people and some people may be jealous at you. That can happen. So it is impossible to find a person without having any jealousy in this world. Just like that, it is impossible to find a faithful woman in this world. That is what the poet says, right? It is very impossible to find a faithful woman, right? Then the poet says, and find what wind serves to advance an honest mind. What do you mean by that, right? And find what wind serves to advance an honest mind. Discover what force in the world helps a truly honest person succeed. The speaker implies that honesty is rarely rewarded, right? Honesty is rarely rewarded. This is another conceit that we can find when it comes to the poem. So in simple terms, in this conceit, the poet says, right, it is very rarely that we can find an honest person. Now in the previous one, the poet actually mentions about the jealousy, right? Now in this particular example, he says it is very difficult to find an honest mind, right? Because most of the people who live in this world are dishonest, right? For their advancement, they will do anything, right? In order to improve themselves, people will do anything and everything, right? So here the poet says it is very difficult to find people with honest mindset, right? So the poet says, where can you find, and find what wind, right? So here wind means the global setting, right? The global setting actual, right? when you go through the global setting, you cannot find a honest man, right? Wind here is actually can be taken as a powerful metaphor, right? Like sailing here and there on a ship, right? Even if you sail here and there in the world, you will never be able to find an honest mind because people are dishonest, right? So if it is impossible to find an honest mind in this world, sir, same impossibility can be found when it comes to women, right? So this is the idea given, right? So this is another conceit, right? So it says in simple words, find, discover, go and search. What wind? Wind means some kind of external help, right? You can sail all around the world, right? You can use a ship and sail all around the world. That is what we call what wind serves to advance an honest mind. Help. Serve means help. An honest mind means actually truthful, virtuous, and faithful person, right? So in simple words, it says discover what kind of fortune or circumstance can actually help an honest, faithful person move ahead in this world. So it is very difficult to honest people to move on in this world, right? Honest people will be neglected and ill-treated, other people will laugh at them. So it is very difficult honest people to survive, right? That is what he says. It is a metaphysical conceit, right? Using the metaphor of a ship needing a wind, Donne cleverly suggests that in the voyage of life, if you take your entire life as a voyage, right, it is very difficult to find an honest mind, right? It is very difficult to find honest people in this world because most of them are dishonest. If most of them are dishonest, right, the same impossibility can be found when it comes to finding faithful women, right? The same impossibility can be there when finding faithful women. That is what it says, right? It is impossible to find even honesty and virtue in this world, and same impossibility can be found when it comes to finding faithful women. Check whether you guys have completed. Pass me a message. We can move on to the next part, right? Right. So if you go through all the conceits, let's discuss one by one. First one, go and catch a falling star. Catching a shooting star is impossible. Just as it is impossible to find a woman who is perfectly true and faithful. Second one, getting with child a mandrake root. Mandrake was a plant thought to have magical powers and shape like a human. Impregnating a root is absurd. Donne compares this impossibility with finding a faithful woman. Third one, telling where all past years are. Here the poet says, it is difficult to move on to the past years. Time that has gone can never be found again. Just as past years cannot be recovered, true constancy in women cannot be found. Both are hopeless quests. Fourth one, who cleft the devil's foot? Popular superstition said the devil had a cloven hoof. Imagining someone splitting the devil's foot is another impossible task because no man in this world will be able to do that brave task, right? So it is impossible. So if it is impossible, same impossibility can be found when we are trying to find a faithful woman. Fifth one, teach me to hear mermaids singing. So the poet says, mermaids are mythical creatures whose singing was enchanting but dangerous, right? So in real life, you don't find such creatures, right? It is a conceit because hearing mermaids sing is impossible. Same impossibility to stress how hard it is to find constancy in women. Sixth one, uh, basically to advance an honest mind, or else envy is stinging. Envy refers to jealousy. It is very difficult to find a person in this world who is not jealous. If it is that much difficult, it is very impossible to find constant woman in this world, right? Okay, the sixth one, to advance an honest mind. What do you mean by that? As ships need to wind to move, an honest mind, truthful person would need good fortune to succeed, because the world will not allow honest people to survive, right? They will always try to destroy the honest people. That is the reality of the world, right? Okay. I hope you can understand up to this extent. Then we will move on to the next part. If thou best born to strange sights, right? Things invisible to see, right? So it says, if thou best born to strange sights, things invisible to see. Check whether you have this part in your poem. Do you have this part? Is this included in the poem?
Yes,
If it
sir.
is, all right, okay, good. Right. If thou best born to strange sights, what do you mean by that? If you are destined to see extraordinary or rare things, right? So the poet says, if you are born to this world, if you are ready to see strange and marvelous, unusual visions in this world, right? Things invisible to see. Now here we have another conceit. The poet says, if you have the power to see, right? If you have the power to see some kind of marvelous, extraordinary things in this world, which other people are not capable of seeing, which other people are not ready to witness, things invisible to see, right? This is what the poet says. Strange sights means marvelous, unusual visions, right? Things invisible to see, right? So if you have the capability of listening to or hearing to strange things in this world, right? If you have that ability, so here you have that conditional sentence, right? If that is also not possible, right? Can you see that the poet has used the word if? The word if itself refers that it is impossible, right? As a human being, you will be able to see the normal things that other people can also witness. You don't have superpowers like Superman, right? But just imagine if you have a superpower where you can actually see other people cannot see. You have some kind of invincible power, right? So just imagine if you have something like that, right? Extraordinary rare things you can find. But in real life, we know that we don't have such powers, right? All the human beings are same, right? We all have same powers, right? That is the idea highlighted by the poet. Okay, hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. If you have finished, please pass me a message. Shall we move on? Right, okay. So the poet says, if you have received such power in order to witness all these invisible things in this world, right? I hope others have completed. Write 10,000 days and nights. Write 10,000 days and nights. So this is another conceit, right? Write 10,000 days and nights. What do you mean by that? If you travel for thousands of years, right? Nobody can live thousands of years, right? Like thousands of years means about 30 years I have mentioned here. But if you take thousands of years, thousands of days and nights, right? If you travel thousands of years, you would not find a perfectly true woman. That is what he says. Until your hair becomes snow white. What do you mean by until your hair becomes snow white? Until you grow old and your hair turns white with age. Even if you walk thousands of days and nights, right? So let's simply say about 30 years, right? 30 to 40 years, 40 to 50 years. By the age of 30, you will start your aging, right? You will become an old person. Here and there, you can find certain white hair, right? So the poet says, even if you walk in search of a faithful woman, 10,000 days and nights having those invisible powers within you, till age, snow and white hairs on thee. You will have white color hair. That is a symbol of aging. Even if you live for 40, 50, 60, 70 years searching for a faithful woman, make sure to remember in your life you will never be able to find a faithful woman. That is what the poet says, right? No matter what, you will never be able to find a constant woman in your life, right? So this is an impossible task. No one is able to write for thousands of years, right? For 30 years, we won't be able to walk here and there in the world, right? Uh, so that is impossible. Same impossibility can be seen finding a faithful woman, right? So the poet says it is very difficult to find a faithful woman even if you walk 10,000 days and nights. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Right, okay. How many of you are still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, okay. I hope that you guys have completed. Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, okay. So I hope that you guys have completed, right? So number of conceits are highlighted here. Let's go to the next one. Though when you thou returns will tell me all strange wonders that befell thee, right? So here the writer says, thou when thou returns will tell me. What do you mean by that? Right? What is the idea given here? Thou when thou returns, it will tell me all strange wonders that befell thee, right? Thee refers to you. When you come back from your long journey, now after moving 10,000 years, right? Or 10 days or 10,000 days and years, you will return from that long journey, right? You will come back to me after that long journey and you will come and tell me, you will tell all that unusual wonders you encountered, right? You will encounter so many unusual things. If you, because you have that strange power, you can tell me you have seen so many unusual things in this world which I have not seen after going through that particular journey. Both of them are impossible, Nibuta, right? You can't write for 30 years or 40 years all around the world. That is impossible. And you don't have any power to see any unusual things. Both of them are impossible to see, right? Both of them are impossible to achieve. But the poet says, okay, yet, if you actually come across all these impossible things, you will come and tell me at the end of the day, you will tell me all the things that you have witnessed in your life. But at the end of the day, we all have to agree that you have never seen a woman who is true and fair, right? And finally, you will agree with the fact that yes, I have seen so many unusual things in this world, but at the end of the day, what I have to tell you is that it is difficult to find a woman who is true and fair. That would be the last request, last explanation that you will give me, right? Finally, even you will agree that it is difficult to find a woman who is true and fair. Even you will agree with that, right? That is what the poet says. Even you will agree to the fact that it is difficult to find a woman who is true and fair, right? Finally, you will come to the poet and you will say, I am sorry, I have gone here and there for so many days, but I did not find a faithful woman. That will be the last idea that you will be given, right? So the poet says, finally, there is no point of moving here and there all around the world, right? You will never find a constant woman. That is what the poet says. Okay, hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message if you have finished. Right, okay. I hope that you guys have completed. We will go to the final part, right? And finally, you will come back to me, right? And swear, nowhere lives a woman true and fair, right? What is the meaning? The speaker bitterly concludes that after seeing so many wonders, you will still not find a single woman who is both beautiful and faithful. Can you understand? After riding thousands and thousands of days, after seeing so many unusual, extraordinary things, you can come to me and you can tell all these things. I will believe that, but I will never believe a woman who is true and fair. Even if you walk in this world for 10,000 years and days, even if you have seen certain extraordinary things that I have never seen, when you come and tell me about those things, I will believe them. I will believe them. I am not going to doubt you. I will believe them. But make sure to remember, if you tell me that there are certain women who are true and fair in this world, that part I won't believe. I will believe any other thing. Make sure to remember that part I won't believe, right? You can tell me so many things, right? I will believe everything, but I won't believe that, right? I won't believe that. So finally, you can understand the main idea of the poet, right? After giving set of conceits, the poet says, no, 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 I am not going to believe that. You can tell me you have seen ghosts. You can tell me you have seen the God. You can tell me you have seen the aliens, alien ships. I will believe them. I will believe them. But if you come and tell me once upon a time I met with a fair and constant woman, I will never believe that because in my life I have never seen a faithful woman. Can you understand? That is what he tries to highlight, right? So, true refers to faithful and loyal. Right, okay. So I hope that you guys can understand, right? So today we have discussed about metaphysical poetry, and I have given you a brief idea about what do you mean by metaphysical poetry, and we have discussed the key features related to metaphysical poetry, and then we came to discuss the particular poem which is prescribed for our syllabus, which is Go and Catch a Falling Star. So they are from the very beginning to the last line that we have discussed, you can figure
Excuse
out.
me,
Yes, Puta.
sir, we still have a paragraph like in
Yeah,
poem.
I'm not finishing. I'm not finishing. I'm just giving you the paraphrasing, right? So what we have discussed up to now, I have not finished the poem, right? So I'm telling you number of conceits that we have discussed. So when you realize them one by one, you can analyze, okay, all these things are impossible. The poet is discussing about something impossible, right? So why the poet is discussing about all these conceits, right? Go and catch a falling star. You can get a child from the mandrake root, right? Tell me where all the past years are, who cleft the devil's foot. All the people who live in this world are envy. It is very difficult to find an honest mind. You can ride 10,000 miles here and there, and you can see certain unusual, absurd things in this world which I have not seen. Yet, I will never believe, right, there is a faithful woman. That is what the poet says. So you can see the level of criticize, right? The level of criticism. The poet is continuously criticizing women, right? So as literary techniques, you have to follow these comparisons, absurd comparisons. We haven't seen a mandrake root, right? We have not seen a man who has caught a falling star, right? No man is able to go back to the time and what do you call bring out the time that we have already spent. These things are impossible, right? Why these impossible conceits are used? In order to show the unfaithfulness of women. Women are unfaithful, right? All these comparisons are brought in order to bring that, right? So we are moving on. I have not finished the poem, right? If thou find the one, let me know. So the poet says, okay. If you find, there are also we have like probability, right? Conditional sentence, right? If you find someone like that, let me know. If you find such a beautiful woman, such a faithful woman, let me know, right? Okay. I know that personally there are no such women. I will agree with that. Okay, I will agree. But there may be, if you find such a woman, let me know. If you do find such a woman, inform me as soon as possible. That is what the poet says. Such a pilgrimage were sweet. The journey to meet such a woman would be delightful. Pilgrimage means a certain journey with devotion. අපි කියන්නේ වන්දනා ගමන කියලා. Pilgrimage means a certain journey with lot of devotion, right? So the poet says, if you find someone, please let me know. In order to find her will be a devotional journey. I am ready to go through that devotional journey. Please tell me. So there also we have conditional, right? Conditional sentence. If means there is no probability at all. There is no probability at all. So the poet says, if you meet someone like that, if you meet, please let me know. I will definitely go and meet her, and I am pretty sure that journey will be a delightful one. That journey will be a devotional one. That journey is actually compared to a pilgrimage. Pilgrimage refers to your parents are going to visit Dambadiva, or else Anuradhapura, or else Polonnaruwa, or else Madu Church, right? You may have gone to Madu Church, right? So those are known as pilgrimage, right? Vandanagaman. So the poet says, if it is such a pilgrimage, I will go. I am ready to do that, right? If you are going to tell me that, okay, there is such a woman, I will definitely go. I will definitely witness that. I love to witness it. I will enjoy that pilgrimage without having any problem. But the poet says, I am not sure about it. That is the problem, right? I am ready to go and I am ready to witness her. Without having any second thoughts, I will enjoy that journey. That is what the poet says, right? Okay, we will move on to the next part. I hope you guys have completed, right? And then what happened? Yet do not, I would go, right? But even though I tell that I would love to go, make sure to remember I will not go, right? I will not go to meet her. Even if I find her next door, right? Even that particular lady is living next door, right? I will not meet her, right? So the poet says, but don't actually tell me because I would not go. Now, previously the poet said that, okay, tell me if you find such a girl, I am ready to meet her. Now the poet says, please tell me if you find someone like that, but in reality, I would not go. Sometimes the girl may be living right beside me, right beside my house. That particular girl, that faithful girl may be living right beside my house. Even if such a woman lived right beside me, right? Even in the next house, I will not take that particular decision to go, right? So that clearly shows us the poet's belief about women, right? So the poet says, even if that particular lady lives next door, I will not take that decision to go and meet her because I am pretty sure she is unfaithful. I am pretty sure she is unfaithful, right? Even if she lives next door to me, I will not go and meet her because I am pretty sure that she is unfaithful. That is the idea given here, right? Even if you tell me that this lady is very much faithful and she lives next door, I will never be able to go and meet her, right? Because I personally know that she is not true. She is not true. She is not faithful. I know it personally, right? That is what we can understand. Though at next door we might meet. Sometimes she may be living in the next door. Sometimes she may be living near my house. Yet I will not take that decision. Yet I will not take that decision. That is what the poet says. I am not in a position of taking that particular decision. That is what the poet says. Right? Okay. I hope that you guys have completed. Please pass me a message. Shall we move on to the next part? Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, okay. Thou she were true when you met her. Okay, just imagine that she is true. Let's imagine that, okay, the girl who lives next to my door, she is a faithful woman. Let's imagine like that. Though she were true when you met her, right? Even if she was faithful when you first meet her and last till you write your letter, by the time you wrote a letter to inform me of her faithfulness, you will write me a letter to inform that don't think like that there are certain women in this world who are faithful, and you will actually inform me by a letter telling that don't think like that there are faithful women in this world. You will write something like that, you will tell something like that to me, right? So you may be ready to explain something like that to me, right? You will be in a position of explaining something like that to me from a letter. You will write a letter to me and you will explain, don't be afraid. The girl next to your door will be a faithful one. Please listen to me. She is a faithful woman. You will write a letter to me, right, about her, right? And then we will see what will happen. Highlight and write down. Pass me a message. Right, good. Right, okay. Then finally what will happen? Right? Yet she will be false, I come to 203. By the time I arrive, she would already have betrayed 2 or 3 men. By the time I come, what may have happened? She may have already started couple of other affairs with other men. By the time I come to that particular place, she may have already started couple of other affairs with 2 or 3 other men. By the time I arrive, she would already have betrayed 2 or 3 men, done and cynically claiming women cannot remain faithful, right? So by the time I come, she may have already slept with 2 or 3 other men. So that again clearly shows us the unfaithfulness related to women, right? So the Donne says, I will be the fourth one, I will be the fifth one, right? So I may not be the first love affair. Definitely, she may have slept with 2 or 3 other men. right? I will be the fourth one or fifth one. So how can we find a faithful woman in this world? That is the final conclusion of the poet, right? So this is how the poem ends. So throughout the poem, each and every line suggests us it is very difficult to believe women, right? It is very difficult to believe women. So I told you the main idea of the poem. Now I think you may have received some kind of a detailed explanation about these metaphysical conceits, absurd comparisons, criticism, criticism based on poetry using logical reasoning. So these are the key features that you have to remember. Metaphysical poets are criticizing women. Metaphysical poets are bringing certain irrational, sorry, bringing certain rational, logical arguments in their poetry, right? So this is how the poem ends, right? Hurry up and write down. Pass me a message. If you have finished, write okay. So now we have discussed metaphysical poetry and we have discussed in detail. Each and every line we have discussed in detail. So make sure to go through the poem. This poem is not that much difficult, but make sure to understand the setting of the poem, the background of the poem. Understanding the background of the poem is very much important. What do you mean by metaphysical poetry? What are the key features associated with metaphysical poetry? How those features are represented in this poem, Go and Catch a Falling Star by John Donne and Better My Heart. How do these two poems are different? Where in Better My Heart you can find the religious aspects, religious influence of John Donne. On the other hand, if you go to Go and Catch a Falling Star, you can see completely different influence of John Donne, where he criticizes women due to his personal experience. Don't think about the idea given in the poem. Try to understand, try to appreciate the language and use of these metaphysical conceits, metaphors, similes, and different types of symbols highlighted in the poem and try to appreciate the writing style. This is what you have to understand. So thank you so much for joining. The appreciation and the themes will be discussed in the next class. So we have completed our first month of this class. We have done so many work, not only in poetry, not only in novel, but also in language as well. So we have divided the class for 3 days. Make sure to participate all the classes. I know you are busy with your work, but make sure to at least go through the lectures and make sure to send us a message if you find something difficult to understand. Always be with the subject. Make sure to complete your homework and make sure to send them. We have very less amount of students, so we are able to go through your work and comment on your work. I'm happy that certain people, certain students like Surya, continuously continuing your notes and sending them to us. We are happy to see your work, and other students also make sure to work hard. It doesn't matter whether you are participating in an online class, because we don't have time to tell bullshit like the physical classes, the teacher's achievements and what the teacher has done, whether the teacher's car is new or not, whether the teacher has built a house or not. We don't have time for that. You pay money, you participate for the class in order to learn something. Take the maximum advantage of that. We don't have time to praise the teachers and the personal achievements of teachers. Make sure to do your work. Make sure to work hard. Go through YouTube, go through social media and find certain other aspects of the poem. Make sure to complete your notes and make sure to do your work to achieve success. Thank you so much. We will meet next week.
Thank you, sir.